Hey, my friends, how are we today? So, on today's podcast, I have Liam Naden. He is a transformational coach for entrepreneurs, business leaders, and anyone seeking true success in life, which we're going to talk about the meaning of that here in a bit. He uniquely combines neuroscience, psychology, and practical strategies to help ambitious success seekers. I'm so fascinated now. Unlock their potential and achieve breakthroughs to live deeply balanced, purpose driven lives. So, thank you, Liam, for being here, for sharing your time and knowledge with us.
Thanks very much for having me, Erin.
Yeah.
Looking forward to it.
Yeah. So, you want to dive into success, or do you want to go first of like creative brain and survival brain? Because I talk a lot about this as well. So, what do you want to hit on first?
Well, I don't mind, but maybe people will be interested in hearing what I'm really talking about and how I came to uncover all of this, because what I really hope for you and your listeners by the end of it is to realize that there's actually a way to solve any problem in your life surprisingly quickly and easily. But it comes from doing things in a completely different way. And if anyone's ever had one of those aha moments, or you've just seen something work out really well and you've thought, well, was that luck or coincidence? There's actually a scientific and biological explanation for those. And even better, there's a way to create those moments at will. So you literally can create without getting woo-woo. I'm talking science here. You can actually come up with those aha moments. You can come up with the right solutions. And really, when you do, and this is what I discovered through a life experience of actually going from a millionaire to losing everything, when you do, you can put your life together any way you want in a much healthier, you mentioned the word balanced. You can
Mhm.
do that. So that's really what I hope people will get out of this conversation.
Yeah. Let's dive in a little bit to your story, because I think that the people that I typically attract are people that already have money, and they have a, for lack of a better word, like a fear of like not having enough or losing it, or like from a like we have generated it from a very fear-based place. So I would love it if you're open to sharing just a little bit about your story and kind of like, just
Sure.
take us through yeah, how
Well,
you
it's
got there and then all of the things. Yeah.
Well, it's the entrepreneur's curse, isn't it? I've been an entrepreneur all my life. I've had 18 different businesses to date.
Yeah.
And it is the curse that we have this fear mindset mentality that no matter how much we have, we're never really happy. We're never really satisfied. And we're worried about it not being enough and there's something else. And really, this came home to me in a huge way a few years ago when I remember it was actually on one particular day. I remember really clearly because I was putting the finishing touches on building my dream home. And it wasn't quite finished, but it almost was. And one of my dreams was not only to build this mansion, which is really what it was, but I wanted to have my own music room as well, because I had been a musician earlier in my life. And I'd always dreamed of having this house with a music room. But I remember walking into this music room and sitting down, and I had every reason to be happy with my life because I'd actually achieved all of my goals. I was a multimillionaire. I had two businesses. I had this magnificent home, and I had freedom to travel and do literally anything I wanted to do. But I remember sitting down and looking out of these magnificent windows that I built in this music room with a view out to the mountains, and thinking, I've made it. This is it. This is success. I've reached all my goals. I've got everything I could possibly imagine that I thought I'd ever want. But why is it that instead of feeling great, I feel absolutely miserable? Why am I so stressed and unhappy? And why is my head just full of all of the problems in my life? Because I had a mountain of problems and these things that weren't going so well. My marriage wasn't going well and businesses weren't going as well as I wanted them to be. But even things that were going well, I couldn't really enjoy it because I felt so stressed. And it was like the life force was being drained out of me, and I thought, this is just absolutely crazy. What's life all about? And I had this thought, maybe I'm on the wrong track here. Maybe it would be better just to lose everything, start all over again, because at least then I could keep my soul, because that's what it felt like. My soul was being, drained here. Well, as I say, you need to be careful about what you think about, because it was literally within a couple of months, I did lose everything. I lost the house, the music room, my marriage, the businesses. And I went from, you know, living in this wonderful house, nice, comfortable bed, driving a Mercedes, to having to move back in with my elderly mother and sleep on the sofa in the living room of her small apartment. And I had nothing. I had an old car and a few clothes. That was it. And, when you say you're prepared to lose everything, I didn't realize what losing everything meant, because it's not just losing your stuff. It's not just losing your friends and your family. It's losing your purpose, your sense of who you are. And I was in such a low place. And I had all of this stuff going around in my head, and I was so confused. And I had two questions that I kept asking myself. And the first one was, why has this happened to me?
Mm.
Because I was a good person. I hadn't I hadn't defrauded people to get my money. I'd worked so hard all my life. I'd been really honest. And as well as trying hard, I'd always studied success. I used to go to lots of seminars and workshops and read books. I had a great library. I did have a great library of all sorts of books on personal development, self-help, motivation, changing your beliefs, your subconscious mind, spirituality, religious practices. I'd studied all of these things, goal setting, but none of it had helped because it wasn't on my goals list to lose everything. And I had my goals list well and truly defined. So I kept asking myself, why has this happened to me? And the other question I kept asking was, what do I do now?
Mm.
What do I do now? Because I had no opportunities. I didn't know anybody in this town. Everything had gone. And the funny thing was, I had no answer for either of those questions. The more I thought about it, the more I tried to figure it out as to why it was happening and what to do, I just couldn't come up with an idea. My head was just so full of stress and confusion. But what I didn't realize is, or actually what I did, was something that I don't think I would have ever have done if I hadn't been in that situation, if I hadn't been in such a desperate situation. And what I did was, I gave up. I gave up and I said, that's
Like
it.
surrender.
I'm done.
Like as some people would say, like surrender. Is that like when you say gave up, you're just like, okay, letting go and a surrender, right? Is that what you're saying?
Not really, because I
Okay.
think surrender, we think, well, I'll just let go and this higher power will take over. I was done with that. I thought, forget the higher power, forget everything. I'm not going to go looking for anything. I'm not going to go expecting anything. I'm not going to try and figure anything out. I'm done with life. I don't care anymore about what's going
Okay.
to happen.
Okay.
You know, but I didn't realize, and again, there is a big difference, and we can talk about this if you like, between surrender and letting go
Okay.
and what it really is on a biological level, because you've got to do it biologically for it to work. And that's the missing part that most people, unfortunately, have missed. But so I literally just gave up and said, I don't know. I'm not going to try anymore. I'm not going to try to figure out what to do. I'm not going to go and look for opportunities or ways to get out of this mess. I just can't be bothered. So it was almost not really a state of depression, but it really was, I'm too exhausted. I just can't, I haven't got anything left to give. And then it was really weird after that because things started to show up in my life. A business came along, literally, it showed up. A relationship came along, it showed up. An amazing relationship and a great business. And then another business showed up. And before I knew it, all these things were starting to continue to happen to me. Wasn't long before I bought a brand new motorhome and traveled around New Zealand for 18 months while managing my businesses. Then my partner and I, we moved to Europe and on a one-way ticket and a suitcase, we bought a brand new yacht. And then we sailed around Europe for 8 years. And all of these things just kept happening one by one. And it was as if, what is going on here? And it wasn't just these things were showing up and the fact that they were great things, because I was having this freedom. I was making really good money again. I was in a great relationship. I had the freedom. You can imagine what it's like being in a little bay in the Greek islands. You're on your yacht. You wake up in the morning and the sun's shining. There's no one around, and you just dive into
Dive in the water.
water off the back of the boat, and you get out, and you've got two businesses that are running for you, doing really well. And you have this feeling. I remember this, it was actually another day, another defining day of my life, if you like. I remember thinking, this is what I've been looking for. This is success. This is all of those years when I've been trying to struggle and and achieve everything, this was the feeling I was after, because there is a difference between having and feeling. And
Yeah.
and sometimes you just know, and I just knew this is it. This is me living my purpose. This is me being the best that I can be. Because the great thing was, I didn't have any of the problems and stress that I had. Things were working really well. But the problem was I became confused because I thought, how come I spent all of those years learning all of that stuff, going to all those seminars, working really hard, having my goals list, planning everything out, visualizing, pushing all the time to reach higher and higher, always gathering more information. Why is it that my life then, when I was doing that, I had so much stress and everything fell to bits? Whereas now everything's working, but I'm not setting any goals. I'm not going after opportunities. I'm not really trying that hard. I mean, I'm putting an effort,
Yeah.
but I'm not struggling with anything. I'm not trying to figure stuff out. But it's like all of these things keep showing up, and all I'm really doing is responding to what's showing up, and it's all good stuff. And we could talk for ages about how many weird miracles, if you like, just strange coincidences, meeting people or things happening in strange ways that, I think, how on earth did that happen? And I started to think that was coincidence, but I realized there had to be something more to it. And that's when I decided I was going to figure out what I was doing differently, because I was obviously doing something differently
Yeah.
and I didn't want to mess it up. I didn't want to, I had to know what I was doing so that I carried on doing it. I carried on getting the results. And that really led me into this whole area of really understanding how we actually get the results we do in our life. Not just these ideas like, you go to a workshop and someone says, well, if you write down your goals and have all these plans and it'll all come, or you practice the law of attraction and you visualize what you want and you achieve it. I never found any of those things actually worked. Not really. And many of the people that I work with, most of them, they all admit that they don't really work. So I wanted to know what did work, because whatever I was doing, was working. I had the proof, and that's what I really figured out. And now I spend my time sharing with other people to help them get similar results.
So let's talk about then in terms of, because the way that I think that you are describing what it used to be like is very survival based brain, right? Like, even though from the outside looking in, I call it like a checklist life, right? Like we've done all of the things, but we internally we don't feel peaceful and having fun and things of that sort. And we're stuck in that very survival based, that's like a mouthful, so survival based brain, right, versus our creative brain. So do you want to talk about the difference between the two, and you know how do you actually know when you're in one or the other?
Well, what it really comes down to is, what you're talking about, a survival state or a creative state or whatever. It comes down to a realization that the reason everybody is struggling is we're going against the laws of nature. And, one thing we're never taught is that nature rules everything. We're taught, well, if you visualize and if you work towards things and you plan and you learn things, you can win. But that's like saying, if you stand on top of a 10-story building and you visualize and pray and meditate and reprogram your subconscious mind that you can fly in the air, when you walk off, you'll fly in the air. But it doesn't happen. You fall straight to the ground. So the problem is we've been taught erroneously all these ideas that we're in control of our life when we're not. Nature is in control of our life. We are driven biologically, and we're driven by the laws of nature, gravity being one of them. And we can't go against those. I mean, try and stop your heart beating or try and stop breathing. It's just not going
Yeah.
to happen, no matter how motivated or what technique you use. So we forget that. We forget that we need to find out the way nature works. But the good thing is, nature not only rules, but it has rules, and it has rules for success. It has rules that determine whether you live a life getting what you really want without stress and problems, or whether you continue to struggle. And there are several laws of nature, which any biological scientist will tell you is exactly true about how nature works. Because remember, many people have studied this, they've observed nature, how it's all set up, and we're part of nature, so it's how we're set up. But if you're to ask any biological scientist, well, what's the overriding law of nature? What governs everything? Well, what it actually is, it's what I call the law of thriving. In other words, every single living thing is biologically programmed, wired, and designed to thrive, which means being the best that it can be. And the reason for that is because the primary purpose of all life is to survive. Everything is in a state of constant seeking to survive. And the best way you survive is by being the best that you can be. Science has a word for this called homeostasis. And what we observe in nature is every living organism achieves and maintains a state called homeostasis, which is the optimum functioning of that organism. So the optimum functioning of the organism, homeostasis, is the natural state of all life. And it happens to be our natural state as well, because we're governed by exactly the same rules of nature. So we're actually designed biologically to thrive, to be the best that we can be, and to function optimally. And that includes for us, not just physically being as good as we can be, but also mentally and emotionally. In other words, being happy. In other words, not having problems and stress. Problems and stress go, and I teach this in several of my courses, that the logic behind this is that problems and stress are actually unnatural because they don't help you survive biologically. Now, people say, oh, it's good to have problems and they make you grow and make you stronger. They don't. They only make you weaker. You can learn from problems, but you can learn a lot better from other things that aren't problems as well. So there's not actually any biological basis for problems. They don't help us reach this optimum state so that we thrive, which is our biological purpose. So the question is, why don't we thrive? Why do we have problems in our life? And really, it comes down to understanding how nature is designed to ensure that all life does thrive and doesn't have problems. And that comes down to a mechanism, or what I call a machine, that every living thing has been given to ensure that it reaches homeostasis and thrives, and that's a brain. A brain is a machine which every organism possesses with only one purpose: to make sure that that organism or that creature survives and thrives and gives itself the greatest chance for survival. And that means not having problems and stress. So you have to say to yourself, all right, so if that's true, if my brain, because this is true for us, if my brain is designed to ensure I don't have problems, it's designed to ensure I thrive so that I have the greatest chance for survival, why do I have problems? Why am I not thriving? If you were to ask most people, do you think you're living to your highest potential, being the best that you can be? They'd say, well, no. So why is that when that's our natural state? Well, look, there's two possibilities. One is you have a faulty brain. It's somehow doing it wrong. But biologically, that doesn't make sense, because nature would have eliminated our species if we had anything faulty, because over millions of years, nature's figured out the best way to eliminate all of the faults, if you like. So the only other possible explanation is we're not using this machine, our brain, we're not using it the right way. Because if you imagine any machine, when you operate it, it works perfectly.
I want to pause you there, Liam, because I 100% agree with this. And I think it comes from do you think that we're not using our brain the way it's meant to be used? And do you think it comes from a place of powers that be, of a disempowered place? Like if we all wake up to how our brain is supposed to be used, how we're supposed to be, then there's a lot of things and businesses and industries and things of that sort that would not exist, because we wouldn't need those things, because we would be working at our highest and being at our highest.
Absolutely. The world's most highly paid neuroscientists work for large corporations and governments, and they understand this very well. They understand the message you need to give people to ensure that they use their brain in a disempowering way, so that they don't become the best that they can be. Because when you're not the best you can be and you're stressed, what do? You reach, and there's a biological reason why. We probably don't have time to get into how this works biologically, but you're biologically wired to seek help and to go out and consume more. Because you're thinking, I'm not good enough, I don't have enough, I need more to survive. And of course, that's the consumer culture, isn't it? It's all based on using our brain the wrong way. And there's not really much incentive I guess you could say, for anybody to show anybody the right way to use it, apart from the incentive I have, which is really to see people living far more to their potential rather than being stuck with problems.
I think it comes from a fear-based place for all these people, right? Like that are like what you're talking about. Like if you have a fear that, oh, if everyone, but how much more could we actually create in the world if all of us were living at our potential, like infinite, right? And this fear that, I don't know, like when I say they, it's like lots of powers that be, right? That want to not expose this, because then it's like trying to have power from a very disempowered place versus all of us are powerful and empowered and being able to, thrive and be at our fullest. So, right? Like that's
Absolutely. And
yeah.
this and what you're talking about and what I'm talking about is this isn't some airy fairy idea. I'm not talking about the subconscious mind and all those sorts of sort of theoretical things. I'm talking about pure biology, about how nature is designed. And when I talk about the brain, you mentioned a couple of parts. There's actually 4 parts to the brain, which I've
Okay.
created in a model. But they need to be used the right way. But they're not ideas. They're physical locations in the brain. This is the way it works mechanically, biologically. So, because remember, I tried all that stuff about the law of attraction and ideas, and all sounded good, but I wanted proof. Proof that, firstly, what I was doing, why it was working, and secondly, proof that the more I did it, it actually worked. And not some just idea, well, if you try this, if you meditate for 10 years, then you'll gradually feel better. I wanted the results right now. I didn't want to carry on with these sort of promises that it might work. But you mentioned a really important word that is completely misunderstood by nearly everybody, because we've been told completely the wrong idea about what it actually is. And that word is fear. Because fear is biology. It's not just this idea. Fear has this impact on the way our brain works. Because here's the way the brain works. You mentioned the creative brain, but if you think about this state of being the best that you can be, this thriving state, people listening or watching you might like to think, what would that actually look like? Well, what it actually looks like, you've probably had that experience on the odd occasion where you're feeling everything's going well, you're feeling creative, you're feeling inspired and motivated, you're really grateful, you're feeling loving, and you're getting great ideas come into your head, and things
Mhm.
are really working well in your life. Or you might have one of those aha moments where you've been working away on a problem and you can't figure out what the answer is. And then all of a sudden, when you're doing something else, the answer comes to you from somewhere, goodness knows where. And you think, where did that idea come from? That's the answer. Why didn't I think of that before? So we've all had those experiences. In this particular way of living, if you like, this very creative state, it's been called being in the flow or being in the zone. Many people have described this as being like something else is taking over. It's not all their own effort. There's something else that's amplifying who they are and making life easier and more productive for them. And if you think about musicians or composers, people who write music, and it's really interesting sometimes, if you've ever watched an interview with a songwriter on YouTube or something,
Yeah.
they're often asked, where did you get the idea for that tune or that song? They all say, going way back from anybody, they all give the same answer, which is, I don't know. I don't know where it came from. It just sort of came along in my head. Mozart used to talk about, he just heard the music and all he did was write it down.
Mhm.
So where all of this state of creativity, this is actually our natural creative state. This is us being in homeostasis. This is where we don't have problems, or if we do, we're finding quick solutions
They're
to them.
easily solved. Yeah.
Yeah, we have this gut instinct sometimes, this little voice that says, don't do that, or do that, which helps us solve a problem, or provides the answer to a problem, or make sure we don't run into a problem.
Mhm.
So this state, and they say it's been described a lot, what this is your natural creative state. And it activates or is centered in, you mentioned the pineal gland, that's one of the main places where this particular part of the brain, when it's active, where it's working from. As I say, this is our best state. This is our state of thriving. It's the state we're supposed to live in all of the time, pretty well all of the time. There's only one time we're not supposed to live in that state, and that is, and this comes down to how the brain was designed millions of years ago in biology, We're supposed to live in this thriving state. However, we need to have a weapon or a defense mechanism if something comes along into our environment that might harm us, that might kill us. A lion in the forest millions of years ago, perhaps, or whatever it
Yeah.
is, because it was a dangerous world when the human body and brain and when our species was developed. So what happens then is that your brain sends a signal and activates a different part of your brain. It shuts down all of your creativity, imagination, all of these things about you being your best, and it activates a weapon, which sometimes it's called the fight-flight mechanism. It's a bit more to it than that. But you feel afraid, and you go into this reactive state because your brain has recognized a threat to your survival. And in that state, there are only 4 things you can do. There are only 4 possible responses you can have to a threat to your survival. So that's all this part of the brain can do. It can run away. It can stand and fight. It can stop and do nothing. Or it can shout out and ask for help. That's all it's designed to do, and that's all it's capable of doing. But the thing is, when you activate this part of your brain, you can't do anything else but those 4 things.
Yeah.
You can't figure out what your goals should be. You can't figure out the solution to problems. You can't figure out what you should do. And this is why when we're in this brain state, which most people are most of the time, they're confused and they're saying, what do I need to do to be happy? What should my goals be? What do I need to do now? I'm so confused. I can't think straight. This is all because we've activated the wrong part of the brain. And what activates that part of the brain is your magic word, fear. Whenever you feel fear, it's a signal from your brain. And when I say fear, I also mean the related parts of fear, which are stress, worry, anxiety, frustration, anger. This is all a signal from your brain saying for some reason it has identified a threat to your survival. Now, of course, there isn't one there, but that's the part of your brain you're activating. And you can only do one of those 4 things. And we all know when you're in that state, what are you doing? You're either running away from a problem. If we're talking about if you don't have a threat to your survival, you run away from the problem. Or you stand and argue with the person and fight and try and fight back and force something. Or you just say, well, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. Or you say, can someone help me? I need a book. I need a coach. I need a therapist. I need some consultant. I need to learn some more. That's all it's capable of doing. And all of the stuff about you being the best that you can be, what your goals should be, not that there's any such, but I should also say not that goal setting is natural either. That's completely unnatural. Give that up. We can talk about why if you like. But all of that good stuff about your life purpose, the answer to problems, what you should do and be, and really that's really going to make you your best, you don't have access to any of that because you're only supposed to have these 4 things in this survival state for very short periods of time. It's only supposed to be there until the lion's gone away.
Yep.
Not in a permanent state.
Yep.
And 98% of people, that's why we're not thriving. We're activating the wrong part of our brain, which doesn't have the resources we need to get us to thrive.
Yeah. It's like a loop. It keeps us in that state. So let's talk about the 4 parts of the brain. Do you want to explain kind of like what they are? You've already explained one of them, but like the 4 parts of the brain, and we already talked about why it gets turned off, but like, how do we turn it back on?
Well, yeah, we've talked about 2. There's the creative brain, which is really the master part of your brain. This is the part of your brain that's in control. It's right in the center of your skull because it's the most protected part of your brain. This is the most important part. This is, in the Bible, it calls it the Holy of Holies, the kingdom of heaven. These are all references to this part of your brain. So this is the master key. It's right in the middle. That's the creative brain. And as I say, that contains all of these things, these resources that we use for being the best that we can be. There's also the survival brain. That's located at the back of the head and around the brainstem area. That's the fight-flight response. And that's also the part that maintains everything about our survival. So obviously fighting off dangers is part of our survival, but it's also all the automatic functions like breathing and all of our bodily functions. This is all managed without us having to think about it. The other 2 parts of the brain are the thinking brain, which I mean, obviously these aren't the scientific terms, but they all have scientific
I was going to say,
terms.
do you want to use the scientific terms? Because we have, in previous podcasts, I have talked about that. So when you're talking about the survival base, are you talking about the amygdala? Is that what you're referring to? Or what are you
No,
referring to?
I'm talking about the brain stem, which
Okay,
is
the
at the
brainstem.
back.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. Well,
Okay.
so the other two are the thinking brain,
Mhm.
which is scientific, it's called the neocortex. So that's the
Okay.
top of your head.
Yep.
But here's the thing about the thinking brain. All your thinking brain is a collector and a library or a database of all of your experience. So everything you experience on a moment by moment basis through your five senses and your thoughts, this is stored in your thinking brain. And obviously this is really useful because you can retrieve information, you can compare things, you can label things, you can create language so that you can communicate with others, you can make sense of your world. But it's limited to what you already know, to what you've experienced. That's your thinking brain. And then the fourth part is what you said was the amygdala, the hippocampus, the hypothalamus. This is the emotional feeling brain. This is what's responsible for how you feel, and it's actually there that you either generate feelings of fear, which trigger the survival brain, or feelings of gratitude, love, everything's safe, everything's good. That's what activates the creative brain. So the only real question is to say, all I need to do is to eliminate fear from my life. And people say, well, that's a ridiculous idea. How can you eliminate fear from your life? Because all these terrible things are going on in the world. I've got all of these problems. There's a lot to be afraid of. The funny thing was, somebody much greater than me said you shouldn't be afraid and not to have fear in your life. Wonder who that was. I thought as I was discovering all of this, and I realized it says it in the Bible. 365 times, someone literally counted, says, be not afraid. And the second most commonly used phrase in the Bible is have faith, believe. And all religions teach not to be afraid, but believe and have faith. And it's not because it's some esoteric idea, it's trying to tell you how your brain works. This is a biological instruction that when you feel fear, except when a lion's about to eat you, that's the only purpose of fear. If something is literally about to eat you, or maybe a car is coming in your path and you need to jump out of the way, or someone wants to hit you, that's the only time that this fear
Yeah.
mechanism is designed for. So
Yep.
that's why the Bible is saying, look, I'm not saying it's a nice idea. I'm saying be not afraid. Because when you activate that part of your brain, I'm sorry, all of the good stuff about you being your best you can be, it's just not going to happen.
Mhm.
That part of the machine is not available to you. And again, we see this all throughout the Bible where it says, do not worry about tomorrow. Tomorrow will take care of itself. Do not worry about what you shall eat, drink, and wear. It's all going to be provided for you. So when you really understand that, you realize there's only one mission in life, and that's to eliminate fear. And people, as I say, people say, well, how do you do that? It's impossible. There's actually a lot of ways you can do that. I've got a whole coaching program with a whole section on all the ways to eliminate your fear. But if people are thinking, well, how can I start?
Yep.
Think about this for an idea. What are all of the things that you allow into your life that make you feel bad? In other words, watching the news.
Yeah.
You know, people
My life has been amazing. Haven't watched it in like 5 or 6 years.
exactly, but people who say, "Well, I need to stay informed and
Yep.
I need to know what's going on." Well,
Yep.
how do you know it's even true anyway?
Yep.
But apart from that, if it makes you feel bad, you're finished because
Yeah.
it's simply going to activate the wrong part of your brain. It's
Yep.
a little bit like me saying, coming along and saying to you, drink this liquid. I've got a glass of liquid here. I'd really like you to drink it. And you say, well, what is it? And I say, well, it's hydrochloric acid. And you'd say, well, what? I'm not going to drink that. And I'd say, why don't you drink it? There's nothing wrong with it. You'd say, well, you don't obviously understand how it works, how nature works. But if I drink that, I'm going to be severely harmed. I could even be killed. And I'd say, well, no, look, it's not so bad. And all this research has been done on it. And it's people are saying it's fine. And you'll be fine. And if you really believe and have faith and change your subconscious thoughts, then it won't affect you. You go, look, I don't care what the justification is. I'm just not going to touch it. And then I try the threat. I say, if you don't drink this, I'm going to make sure you lose everything you have, all of your friends, your family, all your money, everything, if you don't drink this. And you're still going to say, I'm sorry, it doesn't matter the justification. It doesn't matter what reason you give me as to why I should drink that. I know that the second I do, it's over for me. That's what fear does as well. So and when you understand this, and it takes some understanding. That's what I'm trying to help people understand as
Yeah.
we're talking. But when you understand this, you realize it doesn't matter what the justification, it doesn't matter what's going on in the world, it doesn't matter what's going on in your life. if you activate that fear mechanism and there isn't a real threat there, you're not going to be able to do what you want to do in your life. You're always going to have problems because that part of your brain, the survival brain, that creates problems. And we all know this. When you're feeling stressed, you do the wrong things, you make the wrong decisions, and all these problems show up in your life. So that we need to make fear the enemy, and we can turn off the television. Or they still have televisions these days? I suppose they do.
Yeah.
You can end that conversation you're having with somebody that doesn't make
Yep.
you feel good.
Yep.
You can end that relationship with somebody that's not making you feel good. Now, that doesn't mean just giving up on it, but you've got to analyze it and say, is this in my best interests? And is it in their best interests? That job or that career or even that business you own, if it's not doing you, and I had so much experience with this, with parts of businesses that I had that just weren't working.
Yeah.
And I spent so much time trying to get into work, and I kept believing and thinking, I can fix this, and I can make it work. You just need to let all that stuff go, because your brain will make sure better stuff comes along. That's what it's designed to do. If you've got an employee who's not working, I used to have teams of salespeople. I'd spend all my time working with the ones who are no good, trying to help them get better rather than saying, look, you're in the wrong job. Thanks very much. See you later. So this is what we tend to do, but this is all about struggle. So you need to look at your life, and some things, if you like, have a bigger cost to them than others, but you need to eliminate the triggers. And this is what I help people do. And you can see so many more triggers, and there are also subconscious triggers, things that we've taught our brain about what's dangerous in the world that are simply untrue. And you need to identify those and eliminate those. And when you can, when you do, and it's really not that complicated. It's not that difficult. It just comes from understanding, and like anything else, just creating a new habit, knowing the right things to do and getting in the habit of doing them and stop doing the wrong things. And your life literally transforms when you do that. And it just becomes, you get that feeling that I'm talking about where this is what life is supposed to be like. It's not supposed to be a struggle. It's supposed to be an exciting adventure. And as entrepreneurs, isn't that what we all signed up for in the first place, to have an exciting adventure? We didn't want all the problems and stress.
Yeah.
And we've tricked ourselves to think, oh, problems and stress are natural. Problems are good for you. And the worst one of all, problems are a natural part of success. And if you want to be successful, you have to learn to face adversity and struggle and deal with your problems.
I would
I
say
don't
it's
think
like,
there's any.
it's lies that we've been sold, right? It's lies that we've been sold. And I think that our body is talk about biological, right? Like our body is our greatest messenger. And what Liam is saying is that listening to how we feel. And so many of us have because this has been my story too, of like disconnected. I know our mind or our brain is part of our body. And also like we have literally disconnected from that part of us to to keep us, when I say safe, what I mean is like to keep us connected to caretakers or family or things of that sort when we're little, and coming back home to ourselves and listening and getting that feedback of like, it doesn't feel good in our bodies for a reason. And we have been taught, like you're saying, like the messages we've received is like, it is supposed to be hard, it is supposed to be a struggle, like you're lazy if it's you're not, if it's easier, and just all of these mixed messages, or I should say more so of like more of the messages of like, you have to work hard, you have to struggle, you have to, and like keeping us in what you're saying is in that state versus like tuning into your body. And it's like, it's constantly telling you and giving you the information of that feedback. And are we listening? Are we, it's a reason why it doesn't feel very good in your body, right? Like, cause it's not supposed to be like that.
Well, if it's a struggle, it's unnatural. If it doesn't feel good, you're doing something wrong. Because here's another one of I mentioned there are 3 laws. I don't know if I mentioned there are 3 laws of nature. The first one being the law of thriving when it comes to success. Another law is the law of least resistance. Everything in nature works on the principle of least resistance. When you and just think about riding a bicycle into the wind. It's going to be a lot harder, a lot more effort, and you're not going to get as far than if you just go with the wind. If you float down the water, I was going to say the river,
right? Water will find how to get to wherever it needs to go, right? All the time.
The whole of nature is designed around the path of least resistance. And again, this makes total biological sense, because you you achieve the most, you have the greatest chance for survival when you put the least amount of stress on any biological system like your own body. So it's completely unnatural to struggle and have stress.
Yeah.
But we think it's a good thing, but it doesn't make any biological sense. And another thing, if I could mention, that doesn't make any biological sense, and this is people think this is a strange idea until you really think about it, and that is this whole idea of goal setting. We've been told we have to
Yeah.
set goals, we have to work out, we have to, first of all, we have to figure out what we want. And then when we know what we want, whatever approach we use, but we use a particular technique to get to where we think we want to go. So we visualize, or we meditate, or we write it down, or whatever, and then we depending on, we might put a lot of effort into trying to get there, or we might think that it'll just come to us. But we have this idea that we have to have goals. But here's the thing: the third law of the, nature, if you like,
Mhm.
thriving in nature, is what I call the law of efficiency of energy. And what that means is everything biological is designed to get the maximum result for the minimum amount of expenditure of energy, conservation of energy. And when you think about it from us, millions of years ago, think of it from a food perspective. We had to conserve every ounce of energy that we had in
Mhm.
case we didn't find food. We might not have been able to find food for a week. We still had to have the energy to survive and go out and hunt for food, a week later.
Yeah.
So everything's designed about getting you the maximum result with the minimum amount of energy that you expend. So here's the thing about setting a goal, because people say to me, the other thing I should say about goal setting is it doesn't work. If you ask people how much or how many of your goals that you have set have you ever achieved, what percentage, it's not 100%, it's not 50%. What I normally come to when I talk to people about this, when I ask people, between 2 and 3%. People hardly ever achieve their goals, but we're all busy firstly setting goals and then thinking everybody else is achieving their goals and I'm working towards my goals and I'll get there, but I must be not trying hard enough because everyone else is achieving their goals. They're not. Forget what the gurus are telling you. This isn't the way it works. And it doesn't work because it's not biological. And here's why. Just imagine you sat down and you figured out what you really wanted, what your ultimate goal was. But you can imagine when I was lying on my mother's sofa thinking, what do I do now? And why has this happened? If I had some technique or process to figure out what would really make me happy and would be me being the best that I could be. Now, if I'd written it down, say whatever brain process, if you like, had said, Liam, your ultimate goal, what's really going to make you happy is sailing around the world in your own yacht, managing 2 businesses, learning all about how the brain works and helping people from all around the world to really get a lot more out of their life and live a much more fulfilling life in a way that really no one else has explained before. That's your ultimate goal. And what would I have said? I would have thought whoever it was who told me that was absolutely crazy. Well, there are 2 reasons. First reason is I didn't believe I could achieve it. I'm lying on my mother's sofa with nothing, and they're saying, yes, you're going to be sailing on a yacht. I'm going, sailing? A yacht? What? I think I know what a yacht is. So I wouldn't have believed it. And the second reason is I didn't even know that's what I wanted. That was never on my goals list. And I've talked to millionaires, many people who've achieved a lot, and they've all said that what they achieved was never on their goals list. A goals list is limiting. And what would I have done if I'd looked at that, just what I said? I would have doubted, I would have questioned, I would have said, I don't know if that's me. I need to find out more about this. I don't understand it. I don't believe it. I doubt it. I resist. In other words, I'm wasting all that energy
Yeah.
rather than just moving towards it. So
Yeah.
then my brain would say, okay, well, I'm not going to show you the ultimate goal, but I'm going to show you the next 10 steps that you need
Yep.
to take to get to where you need to go. What would I have done then? Oh, great, I've got a list of 10 steps. Okay, but hang on, just looking at this, step number 3, I'm not sure would that really lead to step number 4? I need to check this out. I need to just go and do some analysis and research to see if that's the right thing to do. I don't think that would work. What am I doing again? Doubting, questioning, analyzing, wasting all that energy. So the way your brain works biologically is it shows you exactly the next thing you need to do and no more. What's the very next step you need to take? Without thinking about it, without analyzing it and figuring out and worrying about whether it's going to be the right thing. Because when you're using your creative brain, it's always the right thing.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily the expected thing, and it might
Yep.
not give you the expected result. And sometimes your reaction might be, well, actually, this isn't very pleasant from one perspective, but it's always going to be the right thing. That's the way we're designed biologically, and that's why goal setting doesn't work. And the key thing about that is you don't know what you want, because what you think you want is all of the stuff can only come from your thinking brain. And maybe your thinking brain, all it knows is what you've already experienced in your life. The only information there is what you already know. It doesn't know, it doesn't have access to all of the knowledge there is, including the knowledge about really what would make you the best that you can be. So you can't use that part of your brain. And what is everyone doing? Overthinking, trying to figure it all out, trying to analyze it and everything. That's just not the way it works. And it's completely inefficient biologically as well. You were going to
I
say
think,
something.
yeah, I think it's you and I might be using different language, but I think we're saying the exact same thing. Like I've always said, like we're trying to mind fuck it, right? Versus just like when I say be in the body, like your mind had this idea of what you wanted, and I'm curious if because the goals that I have really wanted, I have achieved them, but it has come from what I call like a heart-based desire, not a mind-based. And I think so many of us have been taught, like, I mean, they say that, 95, 96, 8% of our thoughts aren't even our thoughts. Like how much of what we're actually being programmed or told to believe that this is what is really what we want is actually what we want. And so when you said about like we want to try to figure it out, I think from a place of,
Fear.
yeah, I was gonna say to try to create safety versus you only get the next step, right? And once you do the next step, then the next step reveals itself. But we want to know step 100 before we even leave the dock. It's like that's not how it works, right? Like you just do step 1 and then step 2 is revealed to you. And I already said we've been programmed, like we've been so
Yeah.
programmed to, and I think also too, because the more I kind of ponder on this, I'm just like, man, have we been so conditioned to believe that we have to have goals because here we go back to whoever the powers that be that, and when I say that like facetiously, right? Like the powers that be of like, okay, if we, because I believe the human spirit wants to create, like you're already saying, like nature, right? Like we create, we will evolve, we will grow, we will expand. And this idea, like if you don't have goals, you're going to be lazy. And if you don't have, it's just like this false belief that we have bought into of like we have to have goals. And it's almost like this control, almost in a way it feels like, of like if I don't have goals, then I won't, it goes back to fear, right? Like it's this idea of if I don't have goals, then I might not achieve versus like following and listening to your body and what your body is saying versus um mind mind-based thinking,
Yeah, well, exactly. I mean, it first comes down to, what is it fascinating, what I've discovered about the biology is this is a biological explanation. So this isn't just some theoretical idea that, there's a lot of people who've written books or have these talk about, your subconscious mind and your conscious mind. And to a degree, you have to believe all of those things. I used to go to these seminars and read these books, and people would say all these things, but there was always an element of, yes, well, that makes sense. I'll believe what they're saying. I'm not trying to get anyone to believe what I'm saying. I'm trying to get them to see from a logical perspective and a provable perspective that this is all biologically true. It's
Yeah.
not just some theory that sounds good. So the point is exactly what you're saying, that it's all about when you're in a fear state, even if it's, and you don't need to be, shaking with fear, when you're in an anxious state, which is caused by an underlying fear, you are not going to know, you're not going to be able to achieve very much. You simply can't do it. You can't achieve your full potential. You don't have those resources there. And that's why it says in the film The Matrix, I don't know if you've seen that,
Yeah.
he's trying to get him to understand who he really is, the master and the student. And he says,
Yeah.
you have to let it all go.
Yeah.
Fear, doubt, and disbelief. You have to free your mind. And again, it talks about this in the Bible as well. And freeing your mind is freeing it from the stuck, fear-based state that is activating your survival brain, that has got this weapon that's only there for the odd, maybe once or twice in your life, that it's on the whole time. It's just never going to happen. But you mentioned something interesting about Sometimes you know something. So very occasionally, your creative brain might show you a goal. And if people think about this, maybe a good example is you meet somebody unexpectedly, it wasn't on your goals list, to meet somebody you end up marrying or having a relationship with. And you just look at them. You've never seen them before. And you start talking to them, and something comes over you, and you say, I think I'm going to marry this person. I think I want a relationship with this person. And that's a knowingness. And
Mhm.
you just know this is right.
Yeah.
So that is an example of sometimes your creative brain might choose to show you because it wants you to know, yes, is right for you to be with this person. And it's a completely different thing to wanting something or needing something. You know, I remember another example. I remember walking into a house once. I was looking to buy a house, and I walked into this house, incredible cliff top home, another mansion, amazing place. And I just walked in and said, this is the house. I'm going to buy it. It was triple my budget. It was ridiculously far more. But there was something that told me it's just going to happen. And of course, I was a little bit anxious because I didn't want it to happen because it's like I thought it was too dangerous. But somehow I got the money together and I bought the house and I lived there. And I still to this day don't know where all the money came from. But sometimes you get that, but you have to distinguish between that. And that doesn't come from a place of fear or need. It's just this knowingness. But that's very rare, and you can't force those things to happen. And you can't look at your goal and say, "Oh, maybe this is the right one." You'll either know it or you won't. But if it comes from any lack or need or stress or wanting to get out of your current situation, it's not the right goal. It's just
Yep.
this part of your brain trying to give you an answer when it doesn't know the answer. All it can do is if you continually ask this part of your brain, which can only do those four things. Come on, tell me the answer to what I should have in my life, how I can be happy, and what do I need to do? Eventually, it's just going to, instead of telling you, well, I don't know the answer, it's eventually going to say, all right, I give up. I'll give you any answer to get you off my back. So, yeah, become a millionaire. That's what you need. Or, set up your own business and have branches all over the world or have a holiday house in 10 different cities or whatever. It's going to come up with crazy stuff so that even if you get those things, which is very unlikely you will, they're not going to make you happy because they're
Yeah.
not actually what you want.
Yeah. And what Liam's referring to when we talk about like fear, I'm glad you said this. It's not just fear, right? It's like worry, stress, anxiety, whatever, all those lower vibration emotions. And in today's world, that doesn't look like a line anymore, right? That looks like sitting in the car and like stressing about if you're going to be on time, or like scrolling Instagram and like all of those. It's just like paying attention to your body of like, what does that feel like? It's like this constant, in my body, it felt like just this low state of just it didn't necessarily, like, definitely sometimes some certain things would feel like fear, and sometimes it was just this lower state of just, man, I don't even know how to describe it. And it's just this and I think so many of us are so used to feeling that we don't even know what you are describing, Liam. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Because
It's the normal state of life, isn't it,
yeah,
for most people?
yeah,
Yeah. It was my normal state for years.
yeah,
I thought this was natural and normal.
yeah.
But just because something's typical doesn't mean it's
Just,
normal,
yes.
you know.
Yeah, totally.
But I think the other thing to realize too, because as you say, they're not necessarily, people say to people, I don't feel afraid. You have fears that you're not aware of. You have
Yep.
subconscious fears. The manifestation of those fears is the stress, worry, anxiety,
Yep.
anger, bitterness, frustration. They are all symptoms that there's a subconscious fear that's the fear that's creating all of those things. Because why are you anxious? Why are you frustrated? It's because you're worried about something. A lot of the time, you're not even aware of it. And again, I have a process called brain rebalancing in one of my coaching programs to help people find out what they're afraid of, find out what their subconscious fears are so they can get rid of them. But that fear drives everything.
Yeah.
It's the underlying driver of all pain and problems in life.
Yeah. I think, like what you said, just because it's typical doesn't mean it's
Normal.
supposed. What'd you say?
Normal.
normal or supposed to be that way, right? And like I've always said, like it's not like you're going to your friends or your child's soccer game and when people are like, how are you today, you're like, like things are going so well and I had so much fun, and it's like I have so much free time. And it's like we as a society, at least in the Western world, have like connected through struggle and stress, and it has kept us on this continual thing versus just because everyone else's life looks like that doesn't mean that that's that the way I either want to live or I want to feel.
Well,
Um,
human history is full of things that everyone would believe was true that turned out not to be true.
yep,
Everyone believed the Earth was flat.
yep,
Everyone believed that that the sun and all the planets revolved around the Earth. Everyone said that's the greatest scientists of the all throughout history all said that was a fact.
yeah,
There was a medical practice called bloodletting, where if someone was sick, you drained their blood. Every great medical teacher for thousands of years said that was the way you cured people. And we look back on that now and we say, well, that's just not true. We know
yep,
it's not true.
yeah,
And that's the point I'm really making with all this information about the brain and how you work and how it works. Just because everybody thinks something else doesn't mean it's true.
yeah. And so, okay, so let's talk just a little bit about that because I think there's a lot of people that here we go back to fear, right? We're afraid to break from the pack or the herd. And I think that is a biological thing. Do you agree with that? Do you think that that comes from like, okay, back in the day when we all were a tribe and we all had to stick together, then if we did speak up, we did say, hey, I'm not doing that, then we were ousted. Like, what do you believe that that's kind of where that comes from, and our fear of like, okay, and that doesn't look like I don't want to be with the tribe anymore. It looks like I don't want to do that or I don't agree with you. It's very less than it used to be, right? But it's still in our bodies biologically. It still is the same feeling.
Well, it's only in our bodies biologically when we're in a fear state,
Okay.
because this is another defense mechanism for fear. Because you can imagine, the tribe of natives from the village over the hill, they're walking over the hill and they want to kill everybody. What's the reaction? Everyone becomes afraid. And
Yeah.
what do you have to do when you're faced with a threat? You all have to get together. You all have to protect each other.
Yeah.
And so that's why we have this sense we need to hang on to this community, even if it's
Hmm.
dragging us down. And even if we could actually, what normally happens, create a far better community, we have this opportunity to create our own community of like-minded people who are
Yeah.
going to pull us up and help us be the best that we can be as we help them. But there's another reason why biologically in that state we have this need, if you like, to be together with other people in an
Yeah.
unhealthy way. And that is, if the tribe is coming over the hill, what's the most effective way for your tribe to survive, or the lions are
Just stay.
running
Yeah.
at you or whatever?
Yeah.
What you do is everybody becomes in a state where you need a leader. You need to, so what your brain does is it says, remember calling out for help was one of those four things.
Hmm.
Your brain automatically switches and says, who can tell me what to do to survive?
Hmm.
So we become totally open to, because you have a leader who tells you, right, or run or do whatever it is at this moment, so we can fight it off. So the point is, we have this propensity, or this, it's totally natural when we're in a fear or anxious state. Someone can literally program our mind and tell us what to do, because that's what our brain is looking to do. It's looking for instruction. It's saying, I don't know the answer. I need to seek to get some help. Who can help me? Now, all the great, as I say, the what do you call it, advertising and marketing industries know this.
Yes.
If you get people in a state of fear
Yeah.
and tell them to buy your product, they
Yep.
will. It's all to do with how the brain works. This is how the military works. How do you think the military manages to get people to do things that would be completely illogical normally, like shoot other people? They create a state of fear and then give
Yep.
them an instruction. That's how it works. So we don't realize this. We think we have, we're directing our own life, but we're not. We're being directed by everybody else, including
Yep.
the pressures of our own society and community when we're in a state of fear. When you're not in the state of fear, when your creative brain is working, your awareness goes way up. You start to see the totality of who you are, what your life is, the way things are. And rather than this programmed thing, if you like, I guess it's a a word that people like to use, we're all programmed, but it is true,
But it is,
unfortunately.
yeah. Yeah. Totally. I
And
mean,
that's
it's
this is the biological explanation of it. It's not anything to do with
yeah.
subliminal or whatever. It's pure biology, the biology of survival,
Yeah.
either surviving or thriving.
Yeah. Totally. So is there anything else that I haven't asked or that you want to share that maybe left out? I mean, we didn't talk too much about the pineal gland and like how do you, because I believe that's like the connection to the infinite. Do you want to share a little bit about that, or is there anything else that you want to that share?
Well, that's really what I call the creative brain.
Okay.
Science is more and more understanding what religion has explained for thousands of years, that the pineal gland, and there are other parts of the brain as well that scientists are looking at in that general area, which seem to have this influence and this cause, if you like, on creativity, imagination. Because remember, we're talking about here that something here that's nothing to do with your thoughts. Because where do you get those aha ideas? Where do you get where do you get new information? How do you see things that you've never seen before? This is something different. So the pineal gland is certainly part of it. But the important thing, I mean, it's really quite simple. It's just to realize that you need to identify the triggers in your life that are triggering fear, stress, worry, and anxiety, which are simply your brain's way of trying to tell you that it thinks, most of the time wrongly, that
Yep.
there's a threat to your survival, and that's going to keep you stuck. Eliminate the triggers, and then you naturally just activate your creative brain, and your life naturally flows in the right direction. And all you need to do is just go along for the ride. Do what
Well,
you need to do,
trust. I
and
think that's a big one too, right? Trusting. Like, I don't think
you don't
we,
need to. Can I just another challenging question?
yeah,
What is trust? Trust only comes from understanding and knowing that that's the way it works. You know, people say, well, I trust something's going to happen. They don't trust, they're afraid, and they hope that something will happen. But if you think about it, do you trust that the sun is going to rise tomorrow? Or do you trust your heart's going to keep beating? Do you trust that when you're driving down the road, all of the cars coming the other way, they're going
yeah.
to stay
It's like
away?
a no,
You
yeah,
don't
like
trust. What you do is you just know that's the way it works.
knowing. Yeah.
And the more you know about how your brain works, and I have things like a course I've created, a free one on my website actually, which gives you an experience of this. Once you see it in action, you go, well, I don't need to trust it. This is just, do you trust your car is going to drive when you turn the key on? You
I think
just
that's
know it
different though.
is.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think okay. I do think that there are like I think there's a difference, right? Because I think you have built up evidence, right? Like so let's use the car for example. If your car didn't start for a couple of times and you would have that evidence, it's like, "Ooh, I don't know if I trust that it's going to because I've had evidence," right? And so where is that like the evidence that we have that the sun has always when you wake up the sun is always there, we have that evidence versus do you do you have that knowing that your car is going to start? Yes, because I have so much evidence, but if my car were to stop starting for a couple of times, would I have that knowing? I don't know if I would. Tell me your thoughts on
Well,
that.
Well, I guess the point that I'm really making is, and this is again, it says in that film, The Matrix, I can show you the door, but you're the one who has to step through it.
Yeah.
And the only way you step through it is through understanding, because we talk about letting go and having faith and all those things. This really is. It's what I experience. It's not just hoping deep down that something will work and that you are sort of letting go.
Yeah.
It's absolutely with no hesitation, and the only way you can get to that place is through understanding. And so, like the hydrochloric acid, you can't get there by hoping, because whenever you hope and think something will work and even fool yourself that you are letting go when you're not, there's a massive difference between really letting go and thinking that you are. But it's only when you do that, and that's what I'm trying to do, is explain how it works so you can see, well, this makes sense. Why should I get into my car and doubt that it's going to go?
Yeah.
Even if it doesn't start a few times, well, I know, well, there's something wrong. I need to get it fixed. It's not like I think there's some faulty mechanism that the car's designed to do something different. You just know there's a fault there that needs correcting. But when you do this, the great thing is you have, and all it takes is an experience of something where wow, how did that happen? That must be what we've been talking about, my creative brain at work. Yes, I can see that I really did let go in that moment, or about that thing, and something unexpected showed up.
Mhm.
That's the proof. That's
Yeah.
the evidence. Because
Yeah.
again, as I said, I didn't want to go and learn from just some other guru who told me all of these great things without any proof. I
Yeah.
was over that. I want the
Yeah.
proof.
Yeah.
What worked? What's worked for me? and what is working. That's all I'm interested in. And
Yeah.
so I think when you go down that track and you say, yeah, I do want some proof, I do want some evidence. It sounds good, sounds logical, and it sounds logical enough that I'll actually do it rather than just, well, maybe I'll try it and not sure about it. When you're convinced it'll work, then you try it, then you see the proof, and then you're off. And
Yeah.
then it just gets, then like what's happened to me, these things just keep showing up. I mean, things just keep happening or have done that are so strange and bizarre that I would really have just given up trying to make any plans, trying to expect anything to happen, and then you can just let go and enjoy the moment. And that's what life's
That's
supposed to be about.
that's what we're trying to go for anyways, right? Like all of the goals and all of the things are ultimately to enjoy, I believe, is like to enjoy the moment, right? It's like I always say, like, why are we going around the back door to come in the front? We can just come in the front and like be in the moment and have fun. But somewhere
Because
along the
we're
way we've
afraid.
all been yeah, somewhere along the
We've
way we've
been
all been
taught
told that's not okay.
we're taught we're limited. You can't.
Yeah.
You have to make things happen. If you don't, then someone else is going to harm you.
Yeah.
You have to be in control. All of
Yeah.
these things. If you want to be in control, let your creative brain be in control, not this other thing.
Yeah.
Because, and you mentioned right at the beginning, actually, maybe we've got a few minutes to say or a moment. What is
Yeah.
success? What's the definition of success?
Yes.
Well, people have all these ideas about what success is. All I can give you is the only definition I've ever found in all of science and all of religion. And the definition of success is being the best that you can be, being in a state of homeostasis, your optimum functioning. That's what success is. That means as good as you can be physically, and it means happy, emotionally, mentally, feeling happy without problems and stress. That's the only definition. So if that's the only definition of success, what's all this other stuff? What about it's having your own business? It's having a great relationship. It's having all the money you need. It's having freedom. It's all of those things aren't success. They are all things that you think will make you happy. You
Yeah.
don't want the money and the car and the house and the relationship for what it is. You want it for how it's going to make you feel. But
Yep.
you just think that's going to make you happy. So being happy is always the goal.
Yeah.
Not having problems is always the purpose, because that's the purpose of biological life, is
Yeah.
to be happy, be the best that it can be. You don't want to be happy and problem free because it's unnatural. You want to be that because that's your natural state. That's the way you're designed to be.
Yeah.
And everything else is you fighting against that. And that all, as we know, law of resistance, fighting against it causes problems. It's not natural.
Yeah. I love that because I just was having this same conversation with someone else on the podcast, and it's like we've been sold, and you and I've said this multiple times on the podcast already. It's like we've been sold all of these lies that all of the things, right? Consumer consumption, all of this to get you to the place. It's like, but you could just bypass all of that, and then everything else might be a byproduct, right? But what we're really after is, like you said, is joy, is fulfillment, is happiness, is homeostasis. So
Hmm.
thank you, Liam. Do you have anything else you want to say, or where can people find you, learn more about you, things of that sort?
Well, they can find me on my website, liamnaden.com, and I've got a lot of information there. And actually, I'd love it to share what I've just created, which is a new mini course about how
Okay.
to unlock your rapid solution brain. So if anyone's listening or watching, and maybe you're on your phone or your computer, just open your email right now and send an email to course, COURSE, at liamnaden.com, and you'll get instant access to this short audio mini course that's going to show you how you can create an aha moment on demand. Remember, we mentioned that about we get these things randomly. There's a biological, scientific way that you can get the right answer to any problem literally on demand, but it's about using your brain differently. And so I explain it all in this mini course. So
Okay.
really encourage people to check this out.
Okay.
It's just send an email to course@liamnaden.com, or you can just go to my website, liamnaden.com, and you'll find it there as well.
I'll put the link in the actual, I'll go do this, and I'll also put the link in the show notes. That way you guys have it. So if you're listening or you're watching, just go into the show notes and you can just click on the link and then it'll be there for you. So thank you, Liam. It was so fun. Thank you for your time and your knowledge. I had a blast.
Me too. Thanks so much, Erin.
Okay.
Thank you.
And to each of you, thank you for watching, for listening, and until next time.